boom, how's going? How's going? It is I again, your boy, and welcome to M5 Successful Friends. No, it is M5 Property Addicts featuring Christiaan. And Christiaan, he is our finance guy. We call him the bag money guy. And he is always here talking about anything and everything about money because he understands how the banks works. Christiaan, good morning. How are you doing?
Great, thanks, and you, Taurai.
Good stuff. Today, particularly, we want to talk about the foreigner. We do know that in our country, South Africa, there are many people who are coming from anywhere and everywhere, from Japan, China, England, and some of the African countries. And they come in to stay here, they find home here, just like myself, and they get married here. Now, the question here today that I would like Christiaan to help us with is, can a foreigner buy a property in South Africa? Be it it's a property for investment, be it a property you want to stay in it, whatever circumstance it is, are the banks willing to fund a foreigner? Some people say to me, hey, you're lucky because you married to South Africa. And I'm like, oof, I wasn't thinking about that when I got married. I just got married, you know? That problem got solved. But Christiaan, you're the expert. You know what the bank are looking for. Maybe let's define what is a foreigner in terms of the banking system. How do they view it?
Yeah, so first and foremost, a foreigner is a non-South African citizen. And then there's also a distinction between a non-citizen and non-resident. And that's one of the key things to also look at. So you can have a non-resident foreigner, which is somebody who's outside of our borders trying to buy a property here, or you can have a non-citizen who is a temporary resident in South Africa, so they're here on a permit basis, or you can have a non-citizen who has permanent residency where they've been issued a South African ID book.
Okay. So basically, there's a difference there in terms of how the banks view each and every circumstance there, right?
Sort of. These are all their definitions that they look at. But ultimately, it's just looked at from 2 points of view. So if you are a non-citizen, but you've got a South African ID book, in other words, you've got permanent residency, they score you exactly as if you are a South African citizen. So there's no difference. But if you're here on permit basis, not all of the banks will offer full lending. As a matter of fact, as we record this, none of the banks offer full lending, so they won't give the full mortgage amount or purchase price. But you'll find that currently 2 of the banks offer a 50% loan, so they treat you as if you're not in the country of South Africa. And 2 of the other banks offer between 70 and 90% financing. So, but that changes from time to time. But it ties into their credit policies. Because it's exactly the same thing when you look at a non-citizen who's not in our country. They will be capped to a 50% loan. And this is governed by the exchange control regulations of the Reserve Bank of South Africa. So a lot more own skin in the game. I've got a good example of that where I've got a client who's quite a frequent flyer in terms of purchasing properties for investment. He's Zimbabwean, but he has permanent residency in Australia, where he's also permanently based. So he's happy with obtaining 50% bonds because that foreign currency also helps quite a lot, but gradually building portfolio then.
Okay. So in a nutshell, what we're basically saying is that in the event that I've got my permanent residence, and for South Africa, for people that are not South African, this might make sense because if you're South African and you've never engaged with a permanent resident, you're like, what is that? So basically, it's some of us will get married to other people, and the question there is, okay, what is their status of being in the country? So as a permanent resident, you're saying the banks looks at me. If I'm a permanent resident, the bank's going to look at me and say, TJ, you're a permanent resident. And they are going to vet me the same way that they would vet you, Christiaan, who's born South African, who's got an ID. And I can buy a property for myself, and I can buy a property for investments, and it can be one property and it can be 45 properties. No questions asked.
That's correct, yes.
Awesome stuff. Now let's come back to the second guy that you spoke about, Christiaan. The guy who's got a permit. Now there are so many permits out there. I think there's a skills permit, there's a 5-year permit, there's a 2-year permit, I don't know how many permits there are. Work permit, right? Now you're saying, Christiaan, that if you've got a specialized permit, let's just call it that, you're saying that in many cases, the different banks wouldn't really provide full funding for a property, whether you're staying in it or whether you're investing.
Yeah, so currently none of the banks will give 100% bond to somebody who's here on permit basis, because you remember, you need to look at it from the bank's point of view. They have to tick a few boxes, and one of the most important things there is what's going to happen if this person who's here on permit basis has his permit extension or renewal declined and he leaves the country. Will he still be able to pay for the property, or is he just going to run away and they're going to sit with a bond that's in arrears, and how are they going to recoup the money that they lent? So that's where the own skin in the game comes in. Some of the banks being more conservative than others. As I mentioned, 2 banks currently demanding a 50% deposit as if that person weren't in the country at all.
So I'm an executive. I'm coming from, let's say, the US, and I'm here for like, let's say 5 years or something like that. And I'm working for a big bank, and they have asked me to come and work here. In a nutshell, I could be earning 100,000 a month, and the bank wouldn't give me any 70%, 80%.
They'll probably be between 70 and 90%, yes.
So it also depends on who you are. It also depends on how much you are earning. So it also depends on what is the actual property that you are buying. I would assume, Christiaan, if you are earning anything, let's just assume 100,000. And by the way, I know some of you are getting shocked. They're like, 100,000? Yes, there are people that get paid that much money, right? They are called the 1% of South Africa, right? So if there is someone who's getting paid that much money, but they are going to buy a property worth 500,000. Surely the bank there, the value of their property that they are buying and their income, they are chopping cheese, you know what I mean? So I think they would maybe reconsider that, right? To a higher loan to value.
It will still necessitate a deposit of some form. So it's sadly one of those things where they don't care about the purchase price, they care about bond qualification, and they care about the credit policy. And I mean, remember, the banks are massive organizations that policy changes and anything in that line takes a lot of effort. I mean, look at M5 Property Addicts as an example. You guys can make a quick adjustment here and there, change something, and you can compare it to M5 being like a nice and nimble speedboat. You can make quick turns, where the bank is a massive oil tanker. So for that thing to turn is going to take a long time. So they just stick to one specific process, one policy, and they take it from there.
Christiaan, you know, I ask these questions because I've been thinking about them, and obviously some of my brothers have been asking, but what if I go to Nedbank, they give me 50%, and then I go to Standard, they give me 50%? Is it not, still coming up to the same thing? And unfortunately, the answer is no, right? Because it's not about the bank, really. It's about further regulations that the banks need to abide to as and when they are reporting. So it's not just about the bank, there is more to it. Right, so Christiaan, now that we know, number one, if you're a permanent resident, you can get a loan. You are vetted the same way like anyone else. The second thing is that you're staying in the country and you've got this type of a permit, whatever it is, you're likely going to get around about 50%. That's the general rule. With some exceptions, you would need to top in your own money. Now let's talk about the guy who is a South African and they have made themselves a foreigner in a different country. China, Australia, New Zealand, UK, but they want to buy properties here at home. So they are not employed here, they are employed overseas. How does the bank look at that? Because still they are foreign, not just to South Africa, to the country of their residence
so
now.
there is a bit of a difference. Also, two of the banks currently are capped at 50%, so they treat them as if they are a full-fledged foreigner. The other two banks will, one of them actually gives 100% at the moment, and the other levies a deposit between 10 and 20%. But the whole consideration of the application will come down to the length of employment on the other side, as well as validity of that employment. So a South African being employed abroad, I'm currently busy with an American applicant as an example. We had to provide his passport, we had to provide a copy of his work permit to ensure that he's there under a valid visa, and then his payslips and bank statements in US as well as his local bank statements. So they look at the checks and balances around that, and then over and above that, they also place a reliance on that person at least sending a bit of money back to the country already. And that's where the local bank statement comes in.
So ladies and gentlemen, all of this could be a little bit complicated, and you could be thinking, is there an answer for my problem? Yes, there is. In the description of the video, and if this is something that you want to do, you're struggling to get a house, you're struggling, you're thinking that you're a foreigner, you can't do this, you can't do this. And what we're giving you here is the guideline. However, I think it's true, Christiaan, right? If I say, if anyone comes through to you with their own situation, you can be able to assist them. The worst that they are going to get is a no, but there will be a yes, and the yes could be a 50% or a bit of motivation. But the only way you can get hold of Christiaan is in the description. There is a link. Within that link, you can reach out to Christiaan directly, and he'll be able to help you. Now, Christiaan, I want to speak to another foreigner. And this foreigner here is, you see, there's many foreigners here. Christiaan, did you know that?
Oh, I'm waiting to hear and learn what you're aiming at here.
Now, the other foreigner that I want to speak to is the foreigner that is, I don't want to say they've never been to South Africa, but they have no any formal affiliation with South Africa, right? So they are a Zambian, they are from wherever they are from out of South Africa, and they want to buy properties in South Africa. And they've gone on Property 24 on Gumtree, and they've put in their offer with their local estate agent, and potentially they could be from Namibia. And now all of a sudden, what they are thinking is, how can I buy a property in South Africa? The question there is, can they get funding from the bank whilst they are staying in Ghana, whilst they are staying in Australia, wherever?
Yeah. That exactly speaks to that example of that client of mine. I mean, he's not in South Africa. He's not even in Zimbabwe where he was born. He's in Australia. So he's getting his financing. He's getting 50% bonds. The only limitation to non-citizens and non-residents is that they won't be able to purchase property in an entity. So it has to be in personal name.
Okay, so they'll never buy in a company, but that's actually some good education for me. I didn't know that. And they will need to buy in their personal capacity.
Yes.
Is that a blanket approach to things like trust as well?
Unfortunately so, yes. I've seen in many an instance a good example also of one of my other clients who is a non-citizen here on a critical skills visa, so a highly qualified gentleman. His company that he bought a bunch of properties in, only two of the banks are considering financing. The other two are rejecting it outright because they're referring to it as an exposed entity. He subsequently went into a JV with a local partner, and his shareholding is limited to 49% of that entity. and that makes the local person the majority shareholder, and that actually makes that entity a non-exposed entity, which allows consideration from other banks. So there's always a way around, but well, as you said, you married local. That does make things a bit easier, but there's always ways of contracting with local partners to also expand and create proper portfolio.
Awesome stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Christiaan Jansen. And again, if you'd like to reach out to him, in the description of the video, there is a link where you can populate your details, and Christiaan will be able to help you. But for now, it's been great to hang out with you. We will check you out on the next video.